All right, so you're a whiz with databases, right? But here's the million-dollar question. How do you get all that great data out of the server and actually onto a live website? Well, today, we're going to build that exact bridge, and we'll be using one of the web's most powerful tools to do it. Okay, let's really get into this. You've got SQL down pat. You can pull data, you can sort it, filter it, join it. I mean, you know your way around a database. But all that awesome data, it's kind of stuck. It's just sitting there on a server, completely invisible to the outside world. So the big question is, how do we take the results from our queries and actually put them on a web page for everyone to see and interact with? The answer, my friend, is a server-side scripting language. Think of it like a middleman that lives on the web server. Its whole job is to talk to your database, grab the data, and then talk to the user's browser to show it to them. And for this super important job, one of the most popular, most trusted tools out there is PHP. So what exactly is PHP? In a nutshell, it's an open-source scripting language that was literally designed for the web. It's basically a set of instructions you write. These instructions tell the server, hey, go get this data from the database, and then, okay, now weave that data right into the HTML of the web page before you send it over to the user. It's what makes websites dynamic and interactive. All right, so before we can start writing any cool code, we've got to set up our digital workshop. You know, we need to get all our tools in place and make sure they're all talking to each other properly. And that's a great question, because it's not just about downloading one thing. To build these kinds of dynamic websites, you really need a whole environment, a complete setup where all the different pieces are working together perfectly. So to get going, you need 4 key things that work together in what we call a stack. You've got your web server, like Apache or IIS. Then you need the PHP language processor itself. Of course, you need your database management system, like SQL Server or MySQL. And finally, a good integrated development environment, or IDE, to write your code in, something like NetBeans. You'll hear people talk about WAMP or LAMP stacks all the time. That's just what this is. Windows, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, or the same thing on Linux. Okay, so let's say you have all those pieces installed. Great. But how does your PHP code, which is running over here on the web server, know the specific address and the login info for your particular database over there, right? You have to build a specific configured bridge between them. And that's where something called ODBC comes in. It stands for Open Database Connectivity. The easiest way to think about it is like a universal translator for databases. You go through this little setup process and you create what's called a data source name, or DSN. A DSN is really just a nickname, a shortcut. But behind that nickname, it securely holds all the important connection details: the server name, the right driver, your login info. So in your code, you just use that simple DSN name, and ODBC takes care of all the complicated connection stuff behind the scenes. Okay, our workshop is all set up, the connections are ready to go. Now it's time for the fun part. Let's get our hands dirty and actually write some code. Let's see how PHP and SQL play together. So this is it, the moment of truth. How do we actually write the PHP code that uses that DSN we just set up to open a live channel to our database? And here it is. This is the magic line of code right here. We create something called a PHP data object. You'll hear it called PDO all the time. We just tell it to create a new connection and we pass it our DSN, username, and password. What this line does is create a connection object, which is basically an active pipeline straight to our database that we can now use to send and receive information. The pipeline is open. So what's next? Well, we need to send our SQL query down that pipeline and tell the database to run it. And it's surprisingly simple, really. We just take that connection object we made a second ago, and we use its query method. All we do is give it our SQL command as a string of text. The database does its thing, runs the query, and then sends all the results back to us. We catch those results and store them in a variable, which is usually called a record set. Yes, we have the data. It's right there, sitting in that record set variable on our server. Now for the grand finale. We need to take that data, format it nicely, and actually put it into the HTML so the user can see it. And the way we do this is with a simple loop. The code basically goes through that record set one row at a time. For each row it finds, we use PHP's echo command to spit out the HTML for a table row, and we plug in the data from each column, like the last name or first name. The loop just keeps doing that over and over until every single record from our database has become a nice, neat row in our HTML table. And there you have it. This is what the user actually sees in their web browser. It looks like a simple, perfectly formatted HTML table. But the amazing part is, none of that data is hard-coded into the page. It was all pulled live and dynamically from our database, thanks to that little PHP script we wrote. Okay, so this is awesome. We can display data. But what happens when a user clicks a link to go to the next page? I mean, think about it. Modern websites have to remember things, right? Like what's in your shopping cart. And this brings us to a really fundamental and kind of tricky challenge of how the web works. You see, the basic protocol that powers the whole web, HTTP, is what we call stateless. That's a fancy way of saying it's forgetful. Every single time you click a link or load a new page, the server treats it as a brand new request from a total stranger. It has absolutely no memory of who you are or what you were just doing. It's literally like having a conversation with someone who has no short-term memory. So here's the problem. From your perspective, the user, you're having one continuous experience. You add an item to your cart, then you click to view the cart, then you click to check out. It's all one session. But the server, it just sees 3 totally separate, completely unrelated requests. To fix this, to bridge that gap, developers use something called session management. It's basically a way to give you a unique ID, like a temporary name tag, so the server can keep track of you and your data as you move from page to page. All right, for this last section, I want to talk about a really powerful and modern technique. This is something that makes your code more professional, way more flexible, and honestly, just future-proof. Hey, remember earlier when we used that PDO thing, the PHP data object, to connect to the database? Well, that was a very deliberate choice. We could have used a function that was made specifically for SQL Server. So the question is, why is it so much better to use a general-purpose tool like PDO? The answer comes down to one word: abstraction. See, if you use a database-specific function, your code is now permanently tied to SQL Server. If your boss comes in one day and says, hey, we're switching to MySQL, you'd have to go back and rewrite all your database code. It would be a nightmare. But with PDO, your main application logic, all your queries, all your loops, it all stays exactly the same. The only thing you have to change is that one little connection string at the very beginning. It completely separates or decouples your code from the database it's talking to. It's a huge deal. And really, that's the whole journey right there. We went from setting up the workshop, to scripting the connection, to dealing with that weird stateless nature of the web, and finishing up by writing smart, flexible code. If you can master these fundamental concepts, you can build pretty much any powerful, data-driven application you can think of for the web. Hey, if this explainer helps you connect the dots, do me a quick favor and hit that like button, share it with a friend, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. So, I'll leave you with this to chew on. With universal tools like PDO becoming the standard way to do things, are we heading towards a future where your choice of database doesn't really matter that much, where picking between SQL Server or MySQL or Oracle is just a small change in a configuration file instead of a massive long-term commitment? Is that old problem of vendor lock-in finally becoming a thing of the past? Thanks for joining me.